You really can't do it alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've learned the generation that came before me, not just in our business, but in I think a lot of funeral home businesses, really, I think tried to do a lot of it themselves. I could do everything. I could embalm, I could cremate, I could run first calls. And knowing how to do those things in my mind is really important and is a source of sense of pride. And, I feel great when I go up to our cemetery and I know how to measure a grave space, or I get in the green burial area and I can help dig a hole. But really, and for a long time, that's how I sort of saw my value as a leader and a manager. And I think it's still good. I think people need to know that there's no job that I'm too good for. But I did start to realize, hey, wait a second, if I'm doing their job, who's doing my job? Who's looking out over the horizon for the company to make sure that they still have jobs in 5 or 10 years? So there was a pretty big mindset shift for me. And part of that's probably maturity. Part of that's probably just realizing that no one was looking out over the horizon. So I think that's another long way of saying you really can't do it alone. I mean, even one person shows need support staff to help them get through stuff. The burnout rate, I think, in our industry is pretty high. I've not really seen numbers, but I would imagine it's pretty high because you throw yourself at this with all you've got. You make connections with the family. You will meet them from the beginning to the end because you've made that connection. Unless you're really building in those barriers and that time to recharge, you're just not going to get it.
Yeah, I think you've said a lot of really great things there. I think one of the things that I've tried to learn or had to learn is you really have to, as an owner or as a manager, you really have to understand how to work on the business and not in the business, right? Because if you're doing that, then there's no one, like you said, guiding where you're going to go in the next 5 to 10 years, right? So I
Right.
think that's super important. I do think that there's a lot of owners and death care providers now that, it's really hard for them to give up that control or like even to just trust somebody, especially someone like the older generation. They have this way of putting your time. You got to work really hard, work yourself to the bone to like come out this better person. And, I think with the changing workforce, and we've had a couple guests that have talked about that, it's a lot different now.
Mhm. And I
Yeah.
think people expect different. We're also seeing that the expectation is different, right? So figuring out how to balance revenue and pricing and expenses, and so that you can provide a job that allows for people to live and work in the same area and also have some sort of quality of life. And there are times, where, when I look at, like I said, I've only been doing this for about 13 years, but sometimes I'll look at folks who are coming in and I'm like, man, I didn't have all that when I started.